This is video number 1. It's Justice was not served for Daniel. The picture on top of this video is of my son Daniel. The video will be viewed in his memory and for all the consumers who are physically, mentally, and emotionally challenged. Also who have been abused, neglected, and even died in a group home setting. I have been my son's #1 advocate throughout his life and will continue on even in his passing. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Kathleen. I am also known as Mrs. K. I am 70 years old. I now feel it is time for me to address the public to give awareness of a very critical issue concerning our most vulnerable disabled existing in a fallen system. I want to give a quick thank you to YouTube for giving this opportunity for me to share this video, being that I did not have access to this technology back in the 60s to the late 90s, like it is today. Back then, there were not even cell phones. My son Daniel was struck down by a car in 1968 at age 3. He spent a total of 1 year in 2 different hospitals. He sustained severe brain trauma that left him in a coma. He was left paralyzed on his right side, had broken bones, internal injuries, and received last rites. By the grace of God, he survived. After his hospital stay, my son returned home confined to a wheelchair. He then needed 24/7 care. At age 5, Daniel joined a special needs program run by United Cerebral Palsy of New York City, Incorporated. Now, after 70 years, has been renamed ADAPT. My son flourished in his program that he loved so much for 30 years, and I remained his advocate and was very involved in his program and everyday activities concerning his well-being. At the age of 25, Daniel showed a very strong interest in joining a group home that was connected to his day program with the same agency, UCP of New York City. From the very start of Daniel wanting to join, I was very adamant for him not to. I wanted my son to stay home with the family. My son's desire to leave our home was to be with some of his friends that had already joined a group home setting. It was also due to his wanting some independence of his own. After much soul-searching against my better judgment, I gave in to his wishes. Back then in the late 80s, I made numerous attempts to contact the executive director of UCP, Edward R. Matthews, who was the go person in charge that could make my son's wishes come true. Well, that did not happen. I tried many different avenues to reach out to this man that I never had any reason before to contact until the group home issue came up for my son. But it all fell on deaf ears. I believed by now that because of my strong advocacy and involvement in my son's welfare, the executive director did not want my son to join a group home inside his agency. I was also informed by people inside the organization that the executive director was becoming very angry by my trying to contact him. I was told he was considered a bully, and it turned out to be so true. I was also informed by people in the agency not to allow this man to intimidate me like he did other families, staff, but not excluding the consumers. I then went over his head as a way of finding answers I was so desperately looking for. It was then I went to the state, who funded the group homes. This infuriated the executive director. After my visit to the state office, they personally reached out to this man to find a group home setting for my son. Miraculously, this man I tried to contact for months, to no avail, came up with an opening in New York City, not in Brooklyn near my son's day program that he so wanted. This is when the problem started for my son and family. I set up an appointment with the social worker from Daniel's program to visit the site where the group home residence was located. It was on a dead-end street in East New York. The building housed many elderly residents. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. It was a studio. When I entered the apartment, I was immediately taken back by the poor conditions it was in. I voiced my concerns right away to the woman social worker. I left the residence that day feeling totally disillusioned on how a well-known agency could have such poor conditions for a consumer to be living in. A few days passed when I received a call to my home from the executive director himself, Mr. Edward R. Matthews, the same man I tried over and over to reach before I went to the State Department. He was ranting and raving like a lunatic, screaming at me, stating, "Who the hell did I think I was, calling his place a dump?" He was acting out to be the bully he was portrayed to be. He ended the conversation by his threat of taking away the group home spot for my son if I did not make up my mind by the next few days, and had never to be able to step on his toes again. The State Department told me not to allow this man to intimidate me. They told me to take a few weeks to mull over this very important decision to move my son into the residence. My downfall was I believed this was all going to be resolved, and boy was I wrong. What was looming ahead was nothing short of a disaster. I will be talking about some very important issues on the poor conditions the consumers were living in, also being subjected to abuse, being in harm's way. I want to sign off on the video by saying, this is not fake news. It is the real deal. Many things in life can look great on the outside of a box wrapped up with a pretty bow on top, but inside you could be opening Pandora's box. My family and son lived in that box, and now it is going to be opened. My son Daniel was a victim of United Cerebral Palsy of New York City. I realize there are so many good and caring people out there who give and participate in this charity and organization, and I have the utmost respect for them. But these people did not live through the hell and pain the executive director administration put my son and family through. This man, Mr. Executive Director, was bent on revenge. I believed UCP, now named ADAPT, had hoped I was long gone, but they were so wrong. I just needed to regroup myself for the new battle to begin for justice for my son Daniel. I am back, but I will not be forgotten. I will prevail in bringing to light my son's experience in his group home from 1990 to 1999 and the treatment he was subjected to by the administration and by the horrific behavior. I have no fear of retaliation. I always live my life very cautiously of picking my battles, and this is the battle I picked to expose the truth of what my son and other consumers endured. My upcoming videos will explain so much more. Stay tuned. Thank you for listening and watching. Please feel free to leave any comments.